Hi, everyone. Thanks for hanging out in the kitchen with me today. We're starting another week. I think this may be our last week of these kitchen hangouts, but I really have enjoyed it immensely. I've enjoyed sharing with you, getting to know some of you through the comments section, and we'll charge through this last week. But as I said at the end of last week, my life has now become much more complicated. At the beginning, all the restaurants were closed and we just kind of were trying to figure things out. And now we're really trying to figure things out. Okay, so today we're going to make enfrijoladas. In this series these kitchen hangouts that I've done with you, honestly, I've cooked a lot of comfort food. I've cooked the things that I like to eat, especially when things are kind of stressful. And not only have we all gone through some really uncertain, stressful times, but we all need to find joy where we can find joy. And I find joy in comforting food. So that's what I've been sharing with you. I cut around the equator a bunch of tomatillos here that I'm going to use for making a roasted tomatillo salsa. I'm putting them cut side down in a skillet. Now I'm using a non-stick skillet here. You don't have to use a non-stick skillet. It makes cleanup a little bit easier, but you could also lay a piece of foil in there. I haven't said that before, but a lot of people will just do it that way. And then you can just get rid of that piece of foil at the end. I've got a serrano chili that I'm going to lay down in here and roast that alongside the tomatillos that are there. And we'll come back a little bit. You may be surprised to see me starting with tomatillos since this is enfrijoladas, and that is I describe it as a black bean-based enchilada, and I am going to make them in my absolute favorite version. And that includes some chorizo and a roasted tomatillo salsa. I'm going to do these very much like you would find them done in Oaxaca. Now, I have spent lots of time. I lived in Oaxaca for a while, and I've spent the last, say, 28 Christmases in Oaxaca. And been there to teach classes and take groups and lots of different things through the years. And I would never be there without going to my favorite to eat. It's called Abuelita. It's in the main market downtown. It's in the back part of it. There's the Benito Juarez where all the fruits and vegetables are, and then there's the prepared foods market behind it that is called 20 de Noviembre, the 20th of November market. And when you go in there, man, it just smells so good. It's where all of the bread bakers are displaying their wares, and they have this pan amarillo, this kind of yellowish bread, and then they've got my favorite, which is pan de yema, which is an egg yolk bread flavored with a little bit of anise. Stuff is just amazingly wonderful, but sort of sandwiched in around those bread bakers and the people that are selling mole pastes, there are all these small stalls that they call fondas. And the oldest one there, it's been there, and I am not kidding you, over 120 years. So that particular market stall, Abuelita, or fonda, it's a fonda just refers to a little eating place in the market. That fonda is legendary for all of the really classic Oaxacan food. And one of the dishes that's really classic there is the enfrijoladas, the black bean-based enchiladas. And when you eat them, it's typically for almuerzo, which we might translate as kind of a brunch, lunch, breakfast sort of thing. In Mexico, they typically eat a small breakfast, and then they break it around 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock, and they'll go have almuerzo. And then the main meal of the day comes in the middle of the afternoon, say 2:30, 3 o'clock. And then in the evening, you have your little cena. And usually that's sort of leftovers from lunch or a light bite. You go out on the streets and you have some tacos, or perhaps you could have enfrijoladas for your cena as well. Now, I have this kind of coarse ground chorizo here that is homemade. I mean, it's the one that we make here in our restaurant. And it's kind of coarse ground, but with the flavors of Oaxaca. I'm going to let that cook because I like my chorizo to be browned. So I'm going to turn the temperature up on it a little bit here. If I can figure out which is the right one to turn up. Yeah, that's the one. Okay. And we're going to let that cook for a little while. Now let's talk about, so this chorizo is going to be served with it. You'll notice that this chorizo is not in links. Okay, when you go to the grocery store, when you go to a Mexican market, you will typically find it in links. And if it's a good Mexican market, they will probably make their own chorizo. And you will have the option to buy it in the links, just freshly made. This is a freshly made one. Or you can find it that it's been hung for a little while, so it starts to dry out on the outside. That little bit of hanging will make it even more intense and delicious and complex in flavor. So always when you go to the Mexican market, go to the back to the butchers and see if they have any chorizo hanging and try some of that. It might be your favorite. But we make our own chorizo and we don't hang it. We just absolutely let it, put it in the refrigerator and use it straight. But then we brown it before we use it, okay? So I'm going to turn these guys over, these tomatillos over here. And you can see that they're dark on the outside now, on the cut side. And let's see, they're all ready to turn here. Now, roasting rather than boiling, as I've said before, will bring out a sweetness in them that balances beautifully against the natural acidity that they have, the natural tanginess that they have. So that's one of the reasons that I like roasted tomatillo salsa. In Oaxaca, they would have a large clay griddle that they bake tortillas and so forth on, and they would roast the tomatillos, preferably the little tiny ones with the purple blush that they call tomate milpero, and those have the most complex, most beautiful flavor. And they would roast them by just laying them out, spreading them out on that clay comal. And then when they start to soften up and get blotchy black on the outside, then they would cool them off and make the salsa verde out of that. So we've got salsa verde is something that's super easy to make. You'll notice that the tomatillos that I was working with didn't have husks on them. If you go to a regular grocery store, you'll always find the one with the husks on it. But in a lot of the Mexican grocery stores, they will sell them already husked. In our restaurant, we get them already husked, and I just brought these up from our walk-in downstairs. And so I just wanted to make sure that that you understood why there was no husk on them. Okay, this is doing nicely. There is nothing better, I think, than the smell of cooking chorizo. It will draw people from the corners of the house in to the kitchen. So they'll say, what's going on? What are you cooking? What are you cooking? Because it is always made with a mixture of chili, spices, and vinegar. And that vinegar will just fill, and the meatiness and all that sort of stuff will fill the kitchen. It will just overflow the kitchen. These are not too far away, but let's go now and talk about the bean part of this. I'm going to make this with canned beans because that's the easiest thing to do. And if you have some chorizo and a salsa verde, it will be delicious. Now, in our restaurant, we don't do that. We actually have a farmer grow a variety of beans for us that is like the Oaxacan, the tiny little Oaxacan black beans that makes that absolutely jet black broth. And I even brought some of those to show you. So our one supplier, organic production, see how beautiful those are and how tiny. They look quite different from black beans that you would find in a lot of stores. So I brought some of those around. My preferred way for cooking cooking beans is to do it, if I'm doing it at home, is to do it in a slow cooker because it'll keep it at about 190 degrees, which is the perfect temperature for cooking beans. One thing that you might not know about beans, let me just see if you can see this here. There's a little white eye on that bean. That's where that water can go in, okay? And it can't go through the skin. The skin is impermeable. The only place that it can suck in that water is that little eye there. That's why some people say they like to soak beans. In Mexico, people don't typically soak beans at all. Instead, they put them into an earthenware pot and they cook them very, very slow for quite a long time. Now, even though those beans will cook up tender in about an hour and a half to 2 hours, in Mexico it's typical to leave them on for 3 or 4 hours, but at a very low temperature. They will put a spoonful of manteca, fresh rendered pork lard in there, slice of onion, and then if you're in Oaxaca, I'm going to turn this off now because I think it's just about ready. So I'm going to turn that guy off. That chorizo is smelling really good. If you're in Oaxaca, you would put several of these dried leaves of the avocado tree. Now, if you're listening to me in an area where avocados grow, and you have a Hass avocado or a Fuerte avocado or one of the other kinds of avocados that is a hybrid version in your backyard, and you say, I'm going to go pull some avocado leaves off, just know this, there's no flavor in those leaves. This is the leaf of the wild Mexican avocado, which is a, 20-foot tall tree. It's a huge tree. And it's kind of straggly looking, I guess. It's not the most beautiful tree, and it produces the tiny little wild Mexican avocados. That's the leaf that you have to use for making the, turn this one off too, those are finished, for making the flavored black bean broth, which they do all the time. So if you go to a Mexican grocery store and you buy your black beans and you buy some avocado leaves, because almost every Mexican grocery store will have avocado leaves, you come home and you just put them in a dry skillet and toast them for a minute or something like that. And then you just put them in there with a spoonful of manteca and a slice of onion, cook them very slowly. And beans. But I'm going to show you a very simple way to make these enfrijoladas. And that is just to empty the can of black beans. I'm using the broth and everything. Used to, we said you couldn't do that because the broth tasted tinny. That's not the case anymore. I'm going to make these vegetarian, even though I'm putting chorizo on it. I'm not going to add anything to it. I feel like that putting broth in here, like chicken broth or vegetable broth in here, is not a good move. It will not give you the clean, clear bean flavor that you want. Oh. There. And there. We just want to make a smooth puree out of it, that's all. But you'll notice with inside of the bean with the black exterior. So it will give you a kind of a little bit of a brownish color rather than. I had that pan on just heating it up so that we could get this hot quickly. Now, of course, we're going to taste it. These beans did have some salt in them in the can. So I'm going to get a little taste, but they didn't have very much salt in them at all. So I'm going to go in here and give it, in fact, they taste like they don't have any salt in it, hardly. So, but they did say salt on the label. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and salt that. One of the things to know about beans is that they are salt hogs. And so I will typically go twice in there after I have stirred. I'm just going to use this chorizo spatula to stir in there. Sometimes I actually cook chorizo into this to add more flavor, and feel free to do that. If you don't have that really good high heat rendered pork lard that I love so much, then, and you do have some bacon drippings in your refrigerator, feel free to use that. You could add that to it when you're cooking. But I think that flavor of onion and manteca or pork or bacon drippings, and avocado leaf is just spectacular. Okay, so now we're going to go on to making this salsa verde. Another top, that's my lucky thing, is that we have so many of these Vitamix blenders in our kitchen downstairs that I can easily just run down there and grab another one of the tops so that I don't even have to wash it out. So I'm going to put these roasted tomatillo halves in here, and I'm going to add serrano. I'm going to give it just a little bit of water here, and then blend that into a coarse puree. That won't take very long at all. So that's just about right now. I'm going to give it one final big pass through the blades so that I can... Now at this point we would really want to let that sit and cool off completely. It probably won't be cooled off by the time we're finished, but we need to have some onion here to... I'm going to take this little piece off there and chop this. I've got some root end on it still, but I'm just going to go ahead and cut this into a couple of slices. Cut those in half and then go around each one of them like this, cutting it into smaller pieces. And then this is going to get added to our Salsa Verde. Now, usually you would do this after the Salsa Verde had completely cooled because you want this to stay super crisp. And right now, at the temperature that Salsa Verde is, it'll actually give them a little cooking. Okay, so we've got this. Basically, these are the only ingredients that go into a Salsa Verde. I set this up so that I could re-emphasize for all of you how important rinsing the onion is when you add it to a salsa or someplace, a guacamole. It's super, super important to take away that sort of strong onion flavor, that stuff that gives us onion breath, that makes our stomachs upset, that makes our eyes water. Just rinse it off. I would usually do this under a cold running water, but I didn't want to be running back and forth. So I'm going to add this chopped onion now to this. And we're going to also, the other thing that I wanted to do here is to make a couple of slices because I think that these are really pretty on top of the enfrijoladas. In fact, that will be enough for what I'm going to do. I'm just going to lay them in there and rinse those off as well. And then, of course, the one thing that we're missing there is cilantro. So I'm going to pull out some cilantro from my bag here. I also have some flat leaf parsley, which is the garnish on enfrijoladas in Oaxaca. So I'm going to take some of this cilantro out and go over again this very important way of chopping it. I first have to clean up this board though. Let's get all of this last bits and pieces out of there so it doesn't get mixed into the cilantro. And then I'm going to fold under at the top, and then holding everything really tight, I'm going to cut down through the cilantro, not keeping the tip of my knife on the board and rocking like that. And I'm going to just cut down this. This is making a chiffonade, very thin slices of the herb leaves. And I'm using the stems and everything. And cutting, I basically took all of the stems, the big heavy stems off the bottom. So I can go all the way down to the end there. And then I'm going to take this cilantro and put it over on top here. So that's our Salsa Verde. Just tomatillos serranos, both of them roasted, raw onion and cilantro. And then, of course, I've got to season it with salt. So I'm going to add that to it there. And then we're ready to make the enfrijoladas at this time. Now, if you have store-bought tortillas, which most of you probably will, then I'm going to suggest that you go through the motion of one by one, putting them in a pan covered with a little a light coating of oil on the bottom. Just vegetable oil is good for that. And you soften them up in the oil. That will be a great way to do it. Or you could steam heat them. That's another way to do it if you want to make it a little light, or lighter, I should say. Or if you're like me and you're lucky enough to have fresh made tortillas, that's what I'm going to use to make this with. Okay, so final taste here on our bean sauce. I think that's just about right. Consistency of a cream soup. Now, I'm going to take these guys. Let's move this over here because it'll be easier. You can see how fast these come together, which is great because if you love enfrijoladas like I love enfrijoladas, then you can just simply take your fresh made tortillas. I'm going to use 3 of them here. And I'm going to show you the way that they would make these in Oaxaca. It's all about the sauce and the tortilla. That there. And I'm going to just dip a tortilla into the sauce. Now, you may want to do this with a pair of tongs. Lay it down, you fold it over, and then you fold it into quarters. Okay? So dip your tortilla in there. Because these tortillas were just made and they're hot, so this works really easy for me. And then fold it again. And this is the quartered way of doing these, which is the classic way down in Oaxaca. And I love this. So dip it in there and warm up the tortilla. Now that it's soft and pliable, fold it over. But if you were doing this with the oil heating, you would do them and just stack them all together. And then you go through the dipping process. Okay, so I've got those on there folded now. These are a little smaller than most store-bought ones, so that yours will maybe a little bit bigger looking than this. And then I'm going to take a spoon, and this is important that you understand how lovely this broth is with that tortilla. So you want to really cover them nicely with the black bean broth. This is really pretty. They came out very nice. Some of the canned black beans will be grayer looking than this, but I think these came out really beautiful. A little drip there. Okay, now on to these really lovely accompaniments here. So I'm going to take some of this chorizo that I browned up over here and sprinkle that all over the top of it. See, now that, I don't know about you, but for me that's really, really mouth-watering. And then I would put a few little onion rings over the top of that I rinsed off really nicely. I like the fresh crunch that these add here. Like that. Add that. And then we have to stir up our Salsa Verde. And we're ready to go. I do need to give this one a little taste. Came out really good. It's nice and spicy, which I think is beautiful and welcome in this kind of dish. So spoon Salsa Verde adds fresh crunch from the onion and the cilantro, and it also adds tanginess from the tomatillo. And there you have it. Not complicated to make at all. You can make your own salsa verde, or you could buy one in a jar, but it's not hard to do at all. As you could see there. Oh, I forgot one thing. I was just informed that I forgot, and it is one of my favorite parts of this, and I had it right out there. This is queso fresco. So you could use, this is a great place to use goat cheese, crumbled goat cheese over it. It's really pretty. And I also just realized that I forgot the parsley. I guess I'm really ready to eat, aren't I? I'm just jumping right in here. But this would be the typical way of seeing it presented in Oaxaca with the parsley leaves all over it. Comfort food par excellence. Enfrijoladas. I hope you enjoy making these at your kitchen, and I will see you all again tomorrow.